I had a splendid voice. In fact, I'd sing in opera if they'd give me my choice. I wrote to Oscar Hammerstein that I would be his star. He said, come down and sing for me, and I'll see how good you are. And I don't suppose I'll do it again for months and months and months. No, I don't suppose I'll do it again for months and months and months. I sang the wise old owl, and he left the room at once. So I don't suppose I'll do it again for months and months and months.
Welcome to the Recluse's Cookbook Series 3. For anyone returning from the previous seasons, you're very welcome back. And for anyone who is new to the podcast, thanks a million for popping by. Remember, if you enjoy what you hear, then please like and share. It's great to be back for a third series, and I'm really looking forward to bringing you a new selection of guests from all walks of life. As with the previous series, each one reflects my interests at the time of recording, and the third season will be no different. In the intervening 2 years, I've expanded my experience by becoming a producer and occasional contributor on Ireland's leading true crime podcast, the Cliff's Edge podcast, with Irish criminologist Ciaran McConnell. So if true crime is your bag, please check the podcast out on all good platforms. I will also leave a link down below. However, for now, back to the Recluse's Cookbook. My first guest is responsible for one of my favourite podcasts that is out there, the Troubles podcast. Oisin Feeney began this extraordinary project back in 2020, when COVID began shutting down the world that we had known. Since then, he has focused on bringing us some of the hardest and toughest events from the Northern Irish conflict, which spanned from 1969 to 1998. With his attention to detail and his natural storytelling tone, it means you are enraptured by every word and punctuation mark. By the end, you are left knowing that you have learned something very special and important for our evolvement as human beings. Without further ado, I'll give you Mr. Oisin Feeney.
So Oisin, can you tell us who you are and what it is that you're best known to the public for?
Okay, well, my name is Oisin Feeney, and I am best known to the public. That sounds strange to say, but for making a podcast all about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So I'm a 35-year-old guy from County Meath, and I'm not a trained journalist, not a historian. I guess I've kind of become one, but just around COVID, I've been mad about podcasts, and I always wanted to start one. So yeah, I realized there was really nothing about the Troubles, and as a guy who grew up in the school system in Ireland, we learned absolutely feck all about the Troubles. And realizing how little I knew at the age of 30. Like, what about people from England? What about people around the world? What about people from the US? If I can't understand this period of time, how can anyone else in the world? So I said, let's make a very, very simple, digestible podcast where you don't need to listen to all the episodes. Each one should be open close and focusing specifically on like a person, a bomber, an attack, a gang, and just make it, I was really nervous at first. I released it anonymously. And now look, I'm fucking wearing a t-shirt. Sorry, I don't know if I can curse, but now I'm wearing a t-shirt of it and everything. So after about 10 episodes, the feedback was really, really good.
You said something there that tweaked my interest. You've obviously taken on a position here that you've no real, you don't have to do it. But why do you think they taught us so little in school about the Troubles in Northern Ireland?
I didn't think about my history class. I learned about the moon landings, JFK, the Red Scare. I'm sure we did a bit on the Troubles. We definitely would have done Bloody Sunday, both Bloody Sundays. But I don't know. I think either it's too recent to be history, or it's, and this was a huge issue during the Troubles. It wasn't in your back. It wasn't happening to you, so you were kind of apathetic towards it. And that was a constant thing in Northern Ireland when all the shit was going down. They were like, where are the people from the Republic of Ireland? Why aren't they fighting? Why aren't they complaining? Why aren't they advocating for us? Because it wasn't happening to them. People in the 80s were pretty broke. I remember my parents were mad broke in the 80s, and my mom was like making Christmas wreaths to sell door to door, on top of their jobs, because everything just pay was terrible. So yeah, I guess more important things on your plate, such as just feeding your family, and I just think if it wasn't happening directly to you, it's less of an emphasis in your history class, maybe. I don't know. Then why did I learn about the moon landings?
Is it because it could have been a very polarizing topic in a classroom? You know, kids would go to school and there's a unified look because I am a teacher. Well, I'm a business English teacher, but kids come to school and but when they go home, they're under the moral compass of their parents. You know, and their parents could be saying one thing, teachers saying another thing. You know, it could be is it potentially it could be quite a polarizing thing where playgrounds could get split.
Yeah, I guess so, but I don't remember it being like growing up Catholic Protestant. I don't believe politics played into it much in my feckin' little town in Dunboyne. We had a game called IRA Bashings, which was like Manhunt we used to play. That was the extent of it. But again,
Well,
you wouldn't it it was just like hide and seek with a couple of punches thrown
oh,
in. But yeah, I don't know. Like I just remember my first couple of times going to Northern Ireland and not having a clue. Not having a clue. Like I went up there for like sports tournaments when I was 17 and I was what was it? Someone was, oh, it's great to be here for our first international tournament. We were like, I don't think you can say that. We're in Belfast, like it's not, because we were just so oblivious. And
naive.
then I got a job where I was doing some job for the Northern Irish Tourism Board. And we were in Bushmills or somewhere. And the person I was with, I was like, oh, what's going on there? And she's like, oh, that's a barricaded police station. And I was like, why is it barricaded? And she's like, because it gets attacked every week. And I was like, I thought the Troubles was like 20, 30 years ago. And she's like, no, the police stations up here still get attacked pretty frequently. So yeah, I was surprised how little I knew of such a present issue, I guess. That was kind of it. So I don't really know whether we deliberately avoid talking about it down here. I don't know. I was at a party a while ago and there was like 10 of us in the room and more of us had been to Thailand than had been to Belfast. And I found that kind of strange.
Yeah, that is strange. Yeah.
It's weird. No, it's strange.
Yeah. So, what did you do before you got into the podcast? You obviously started this in COVID, so lockdowns, it makes sense. You got to have something to do. What was your primary, I suppose, your primary interest before?
Mm, where was I? I was working as a clickbait journalist for the Daily Star. So it was sitting writing articles that were absolute shite. Um, to pump out like 12, 15 articles a day on stuff that I just didn't enjoy. I had no passion about. And it was kind of the job wasn't going anywhere. I don't think I was doing particularly well at the job. So I left that job and I ended up getting a job as like a hiking guide in the Italian Dolomites for this American company. So I was over there and they were bouncing me between the Dolomites and Iceland for a season just before COVID. So 1 month I was doing the Dolomites, 1 month I was doing Iceland. And then that job disappeared with COVID. And yeah, basically I was saying to my dad, I was like, how do I get into tourism and in Ireland? I like doing it. So he was like, get your chauffeur license, which is basically a taxi license. So I think just at the start of COVID, I would have been realizing that the tourism job is not coming back. The Italian job is not coming back because of COVID. Um, Getting my chauffeur license, which took me a while to pass the taxi test because I just didn't. It's a really intricate knowledge of Dublin geography, and I kept failing it. I kept not studying. Which one-way street goes down between feckin' Drumcondra and Dorset Street. I was like, I don't know.
And it
Uh,
changes every day.
yeah. So and like sure, one day I woke up to do the test. I was just so hungover I didn't even go. So by the fourth time, and I think it was 150 every time, so it's really stupid the way I was doing it. I took it seriously and I passed. And then I did a little bit of corporate work, which I don't really enjoy, where I suit and a tie and I drive around. But now, like, since COVID, and now I would basically I have a very split life. So I do like luxury small tours for Americans where I have my own van and I bring people around the country. And then I write the podcast as well and do the podcast. So all of that kind of started around COVID and I've been doing it ever since.
Excellent. So the Troubles podcast, I think I'm pretty much sure it was during the depths of COVID lockdown that I discovered the Troubles podcast. And it came,
I'm pretty sure I launched it like March 2020. I'm pretty sure I launched it the month Ireland went into lockdown.
oh, there you go.
By
Yeah,
sheer coincidence.
yeah. I think came across it probably towards the end of 2020 because I've been following it ever since. I'm always on the page checking. Did you originally mean to launch it as a historical, merely political YouTube channel about the Troubles, or was there something else going to be there, but this is just what it became?
Um, I kind of just said I wanted to do a true crime podcast. I like the podcast Case File. It's probably the number one true crime podcast in the world. Deadpan telling of a true crime case. So I find the market is mental for true crime. It's like, oh, it's like wine and true crime, weed and true crime, and it's all these comedians talking about people getting killed. And I hated that. And I was like, okay, let's do deadpan true crime about the Troubles. And I made a list of like potential episodes. I was like, oh damn, like Shankill Butchers, Mountbatten, like all of these bombings and all of these attacks have a whole story and a real rich. Um, there's a lot of a story to tell, you know. And yeah, so again, like I said, I launched it as true crime, and then after the first 15 or so episodes, I realized it's definitely a history podcast. But I did market it straight into true crime listeners, and I think that's how I got a lot of my listeners early on. So it got up to like something like 10,000 downloads after about 6 or 7 months, which is quite good for podcasting. Metrics can be very hard. It can be very hard to get listeners. So once that started kind of going, it's yeah, it's been going like that ever since. So it's been great.
We'll talk about the podcast itself and in terms of your development of it. I'm very impressed with the narrative style you've chosen for it, and I enjoy the interviews as well. Which came first, and which do you prefer?
Well, I remember I decided to do narrative style, and then I realized that this is a semantic minefield. You know, you are going to piss off so many listeners by how you say a certain thing. Like literally, I was so oblivious coming into it. I remember going on a hike with my buddy from Monaghan, up Schlieve Foy in Carlingford, and I remember going like, "Can I say terrorist?" And he was like, "Do not, under any circumstances, say terrorist." And I realized how much weight words carry. So I realized how careful I'd have to be. And like mistakes slip through, mistakes absolutely slip through. I do correct them when I can. But the narrative ones absolutely came first. And then I think who was the first guest I had on? I think the first guest was Richard Moore, who is a guy who was blinded by when he was struck in between the eyes by a rubber bullet. And that was one of the most intense conversations I've had in my entire life with a person. And I realized, oh crap, like, you know, though because again, I'm a guy from Meath talking about these extremely traumatic experiences in people's lives in Northern Ireland. And I kind of realized, you know, it would be better if I could. I'll do my best to give justice to these stories, but I think it also is very important to have the actual. While they're here, we have the primary sources, we have the soldiers, we have the paramilitaries, we have the victims. So why not get as many of them on to tell their story? And that's kind of the thing. I think people always ask me, like, oh, would you not grill this person or would you not ask them tough questions? Yeah, but like the most part is, you know, I want you to come on and tell your story. That's kind of it. But you know, that can backfire because I did have like one of the most notorious UVF leaders on recently, which I'll be releasing this month. And I don't know, like he did a lot of very, very bad things. I don't know, did I question him very well about them because I'm not there to interrogate you. I'm there for you to tell your story. So he told his version of the story.
It's interesting you should say that. Do you feel that there's enough? Like, there is this thing. If something is said, it must be challenged. But do you feel that people are only too quick these days in an interview to challenge? I see it all the time. They're constantly challenging, 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 challenging.
I
Uh,
think the big thing is I want the listener to come to their own conclusions, and I don't want to lead the listener in a particular direction. So again, my name is Oisin Feeney. I'm Irish. I call it Derry. I don't call it London Derry. So, you know, what is that term? Like implicit bias. I have to be very careful how I write that I don't impart that sort of implicit bias. You know, I am a little critical of myself. I think maybe in the Ian Paisley episode, maybe I could have said a bit more balance, a bit more nicer things about him. You know, because that's the thing with podcasts, you're held to no journalistic standard. You can say whatever the heck you want, and your listeners are like, "Oh, well, this guy's an expert." Blah blah blah. I trust what he says. So I want my listeners to come into it open. I want them to trust that I'm putting out the best, most down the line version, and to understand that maybe I do have an implicit bias because I'm Irish, you know, but that I'm doing my very best at every single junction to give them the most normal version of it, the most realistic version, I guess.
of all the episodes you have done, which do you feel is the one that you found, well, I think this is more educational. I think the listeners are actually going to learn something here that maybe they didn't know before.
Oh, I guess with the big players, like John Hume, that's not a true crime episode, but his story is fascinating.
Mm.
And I loved finishing that with his song. I loved the way he did Danny Boy at the end. But even like slightly maybe lesser known, the likes of David Irvine, or Irvine, who knows. But like, he would be someone that your average, maybe my average listener probably would have never heard of. Northern Irish people probably know him, but that's about it. Um, and he had a very intrinsic role. He played a really important role, and yeah, there was people advocating for hope and for good things on both sides, even if they would have started from a violent place by the other end. So yeah, I think by that and then some of the ones I've like the loyalism 101, where you kind of explain different loyalist factions and groups and everything. Like they're obviously not true crime, but they'd be more, they're a mixture of both, I guess.
Oh, in terms of the episodes that you have recorded, in terms of the subject, which was the most difficult for you?
Oh, always. Well, two, but Children of the Troubles was tough. So that was an episode where I did a talking about the child victims of the Troubles, and then that went into the Richard Moore interview. But it's just like, when you're writing about something where it's an attack and you're working through it, and you can be very focused and stepped away from the emotional aspect of it. But when you're writing about kids, there was one kid who was they got to go away, kids in the Troubles, they got to go away to America for a couple of weeks to kind of get a break from living in a war zone. And there was one kid who was like, he loved riding horses in South Dakota, and he was crying that he had to go back to Northern Ireland. And he was killed. He was killed within 2 weeks of arriving home. He was struck by a stray bullet. And that sort of stuff is tough. And then the other one I always found quite tough was the Thomas Nademeyer. So he was the industrialist who was kidnapped and murdered by the IRA, and then it led to about four subsequent suicides from his daughter, his wife, his daughter, his daughter's husband, and it's just kind of to show how much of a ripple, one incident, one attack can have, and the IRA kind of buried his body and then paid some builders to dump some rubbish, or paid some locals to, so he ended up being dumped. His body was hidden by a dump for about 10 years. So yeah, those ones I found kind of tough. Lately, I guess maybe the Le Mans House Hotel bombing was pretty awful. That was an episode I did last season, and that one, like the graphic descriptions of the victims afterwards, they were just unidentifiable charred remains, because it was basically almost like a napalm bomb went off in the hotel, and this was just a meeting of people who love dogs. It's a dog group. The was that IRA or INLA? That was IRA, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's provisional IRA. Definitely. But like they thought that the RUC were meeting there, and they weren't at all. It was just dog enthusiasts. So stuff like that is pretty tough, and that's one thing. I try and focus on civilians, I think. I think that's kind of the way to do it. To focus on the civilian toll in the episodes.
So what I really appreciate about your podcast in particular is the amount of research, preparation, and development that goes into each episode. Like you're not someone that jumps the gun on this. You sit down, you focus on it, and you methodically think it out. Can you tell us a little bit more about the process, what goes behind each?
Yeah,
Not
well, each each episode needs us. Let's see if I can show you. It needs kind of a skeleton. So I've nothing really good here. Well, I guess that one. But so skeleton being like I need some sort of thing, like, oh, brilliant, like I've got a panorama documentary from the 80s. I was like, grand, that's going to be the bones of the episode. So, or like David Irvine, there's nothing on him, so there's just one book. That turns out the book is out of print, so I was lucky I got it. And that's a pain in the ass because you have to go through a whole book, but you can't, like, how do you write a script for a podcast out? You're almost like summarizing the book in a way and trying to take out the parts that people won't, uh, just try and keep that linear story. That's hard. That's the only way to put it. So you'll get a skeleton and then you'll draw in sources. So let's say like I'm working on an episode now that hopefully will be out next week on Dominic McVinci. So one of the Mad Dog McVincis, because there's two Mad Dogs. So let's see, what did I do for that episode? I found a good documentary. anyway, I found whatever was the skeleton, which is the basic story. You've got your story beats. Again, even though this is someone's real life, I make this very, and he has a couple of very significant story beats. While he was active, when he was extradited, when his wife was killed, when he was killed, and the aftermath. So I finished the episode. I'm pretty happy with it. I think it'll be a nice long episode. But then like just doing a cursory search, because you look everywhere. You're looking on Reddit, you're looking on Twitter, you're looking on YouTube, you're looking for books, you're looking whatever works. Oh yeah, there was a great Martin Dillon book called The Trigger Men. That was actually probably the skeleton, I think, for this one. But then like I found an interview that his son did just 2 months ago that totally contradicts all of the aspects that what I've been writing about. Like what has been written about his father's killing. What the son said 2 months ago is very different. So I was like, oh shite, how do I do this? I finished the original script. Should I just like kill that part? So I ended up just doing both. I did what has been reported in the past, and hey, his son has just done an interview, and here's how his son reported, because his son was there when his dad was killed. So yeah, I find a skeleton. I find every single source I can. I'll find any books I can. I have a little bit of a library now. I probably have about 100 books out there. So usually if I'm starting an episode, I can kind of pick a couple of books. Like what's that? A Secret History of the IRA is one of the most comprehensive histories of. I've never read the full book, but I always go to it if I start an episode about the IRA because I can choose, I can go into the back, go, hey, I'm doing it. I'm Dominic McGlinchey. Boom. He's got a couple of chapters here, a couple of parts. So yeah, it's tough. But I think a skeleton is how it's important. And I think I once said Wikipedia, and someone was like, once I heard him say his sources are Wikipedia, I quit. No, go on the Dominic McGlinchey Wikipedia page and look at all of their references, all of their sources, because they've got a fascinating list of media interviews, of books. And that's a great way sometimes to kind of expand your knowledge of it. But especially those old BBC Panorama documentaries are brilliant. And again, even if the skeleton could, like they are different from the documentaries itself, but let's say 40 or 50% could be just more or less, not more or less in my own words of what the documentary is saying, but no one would ever see this interview. So you're kind of putting it all in one place. That's the important thing. You're putting all of this information in one podcast in one place. And that's taking the books, taking the documentaries, taking the articles, and putting it one. And I think that's a good way of storing the information, I guess is the way to put it.
It sounds like such a mountain of work. Is it just you that's doing all this, or do you have other people in place, or is it?
Yeah, season 1, I had an anonymous guy, which I think is hilarious because I don't think I should have done that. But I had an anonymous guy who I think he sent me credentials, but he wrote an episode about the South Armagh Sniper Brigade. I was kind of working through a project with a guy, so he ended up writing an episode about Pat Finucane for the second season. That was my buddy Malachy, because we have a really interesting, like we were thinking of doing a whole series about the Omagh bombing, because it is very personal to his family. So we flew him from America. We did the interview with his mom and everything, but it kind of died. But I still have all the footage, so we should probably use it. And then I found a guy called John from Liverpool. So John runs a Instagram page called The Troubles Archive. So just a really nice guy, fascinated with the Troubles. I think he's doing a PhD in it now. So I was getting him to write a couple of episodes. He wrote 2 episodes last season. I think maybe 2 before that. And John writes about the military stuff really well. He writes about, like, the last episode he did was on Top Gun McKeag. And he writes really well. So I'll get John to write the episode, and then he'll send it to me, and then I'll kind of turn it into my tone a little bit. So I was kind of hoping he'd write it and it'd be perfect, and then I could just put it out. But it actually takes a good chunk of work just to kind of bang it into the tone that I like, the tone that works for the podcast. So yeah, I have an open invitation for him to write again, because I love it, because writing scripts takes me absolutely ages. But I think he's probably got a bit more on his plate now. I don't think he'll be writing anything in the future. But he kind of mentioned writing one about Michael Stone, and I'd be, yeah, please come, write. And I pay him, of course. So I kind of treat any money the podcast makes, I'm happy to put back into the podcast, if that makes sense.
Reinvest.
Yeah, which I don't do very much, but I should probably do more. I've never paid to advertise it or anything. So it's all been getting the word out has been, when you make a piece of media, you have to realize I'm not quite an artist. I'm not painting, but in the same way, even in my in a way, you have to kind of, I won a couple of awards a couple of years ago, and like they weren't even They were barely reported in the media, barely reported any. I won the top award in the Irish Podcast Awards, and I was like, "Oh, this is brilliant! I get loads of PR." No, if you don't do the PR, nothing happens. So I have a very nice paperweight over there, but it led to absolutely nothing, So because I didn't do like a press release after, or I didn't do like blah 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 bullshit, because it's hard to research, write, record, edit, proofread, publish, and you're bollocks, and then suddenly you have to like promote. So I haven't done any promotion yet this season, but I have a person in America who makes like my TikTok videos and stuff. So she does amazing. Like if we have a good documentary that she can put over my speaking, um, they can do crazy numbers on TikTok. But TikTok is what people in I don't know, people call TikTok a walled garden. I could get hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views on TikTok, but nobody will go and listen to the podcast. So it's its own entity in a way. So
Okay. You've kind of brought me nicely to my next point. Is like I was going to mention this huge success. Like you've got fantastic views. You've won awards. What was the significant moment that you noticed that when the things changed for the podcast? Was it like a spike, or was this gradual build that just kept building?
it definitely feels like a gradual build. I don't think I had a day where because again, I used to be checking like the reviews that came in. And I was like, oh shit, I got a bad review and everything. Because again, I think the thing is, if people like a thing, you're very less inclined to leave a review. But if you don't like a thing, people are way more inclined to leave a review. And I used to take them real personally, and I used to get real upset about them. And then I was like, ah, feck it. Like it's not. You have to get thick-skinned. Um, Look at maybe keep an eye to the reviews or whatever, and if they're constructive and you're genuinely making a mistake, then fix it. But if they're just misers being misers, then that's okay. Because obviously what I write will be accused of being I've been accused of Shoonism, which is like what's it? Loving the Queen, basically. I'd never heard of that word. Then I was accused of being pro IRA, then I was being accused of pro UVF and pro loyalism, pro. So the fact that I've been accused of everything is great. That means I'm probably doing the right thing.
I think
um
the term is non-partisan. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So no, like it's kind of uh, now I'd be sitting at like maybe about 150 when I'm publishing episodes. I'm getting around 150 downloads a month, 150,000 downloads a month, which are really, really good numbers in the podcasting world. But weirdly enough, you're still kind of in this middle space, like uh, not up there with the big guys that are getting absolutely insane numbers, but it's kind of you're in a place where you're doing pretty well. But that is kind of plateaued now. That's plateaued for the past 2 years. So I would need to either I need to take that. Is the podcast? Am I making episodes that are good quality? Am I doing something I could be doing better? Should I hire a PR person? And that was kind of how that American person came in and started making the videos. I realized, yeah, maybe I should be promoting myself a little bit more. You know. So no, gradual creep upwards would be the way to describe it, definitely.
Because like you're in good company. There's at least you're with there on YouTube. On YouTube, there's four that just stick into my mind. YouTube channels and of two podcasts about the Troubles. You've got the Good Listener podcast. I think that's it. You've got I think it's Northern Ireland conflict videos. I think that's might
Oh
be
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
title. Now that is reposting old videos and medias and documentaries and
Yeah,
stuff
there's a
like
lot
that.
out there. Yeah,
And then there's one of my all-time favorites is A Troubled Land, which again puts up all this sort of stuff. And then of course there's yourself, the Troubles podcast. You've got four very different styles there, four
yeah.
extremely different styles there, and it still gets the numbers. What is it about the Troubles that people keep on coming back to, that people want to know more about it, do you think?
Well, it really depends. Like, I only really went on. I added the podcast to YouTube only like last year, I think. So, and that's been definitely a new. That YouTube is interesting because all the different social media channels get different listeners, which I find fascinating. So, YouTube gets people who are like 50 plus on average, and they're just not podcast listeners. So they'll come across stuff that'll be like, "Oh, hey, blah blah blah. Here's more videos on a period of time that I was lived through, and I want to learn more about." That's how I feel about it. Maybe the TikToks, whatever, the comments are just terrible because everyone on TikTok is like 17 or 18. But funnily enough, like had a high enough demographic in Northern Ireland for like 18 to 21-year-olds or something. I haven't checked any of this stuff in ages because I just stopped caring about reviews and everything, and I just put the episodes out and just make the stuff, and make it good. Um, but like, I guess some of the younger listeners would have said, look, this, my uncle was involved in this, my aunt did this, my granddad died in this, and we never talked about it. We never talked about this at all. I didn't know anything about it. I get a lot of listeners who've left the country. They're like, oh, my parents are from Belfast, my dad's from, he never talks about the Troubles, and this helps me understand my dad better. So that's where I definitely get a lot of, and yeah, if it's, yeah, I guess, and just people interested in the period. But it wasn't that long ago. I've an Israeli friend, I could probably call him a friend now, who'd be a very pro-Palestinian guy. And I had a chat with him, and he just says, look, he was quoting Jerry Adams, quoting John Hume, and he was like, if they can make peace in Northern Ireland, we can make peace. And he's convinced that the answer to Israel-Palestine conflict is in the peace process in Northern Ireland. And I was like, buddy, I don't think so. Like, this is just Protestant and Catholics. Like, you're Jewish and Muslim people are so different in their religious belief systems. And he was like, Oisin, but you're wrong there, because 50 miles away, there's a Palestinian man living on the land, same age as me, same amount of children as me, married like me. And I have more in common with him than anyone else in the whole world, regardless of religious beliefs. He just has his freedoms restricted, and I don't. So it's people come to the Troubles with very different, yeah, understanding themselves or understanding their own conflict in a way, I think.
So people are coming to it looking for answers for their own possible conflicts.
Yeah, or looking to like, oh, the Troubles. It's such a like it's such a what the heck does that mean? So they're coming at it to learn, I guess. Yeah. And the problem with the Troubles is you'll get 10 people in a room who lived through the Troubles, and you could talk about one bombing, they'd have all 10 different opinions, and experiences of it. So it's a very, very murky one I don't know, but I feel like more people are talking about it. And a lot of people will never talk. That's why I want to get them on the podcast. A lot of people will take so many secrets to the grave with them, and I want them on.
Yeah, why do people not talk? Has that got to do with the Boston tapes and the fallout over them, or
100%? Yeah, 100%. Like it was an absolute shit show. And that was like an attempt at keeping written history. I've had interviews where I've had people on, and the next day they've called me and they said, hey, take out that part, take out that part. I know my peers back home are going to listen to this, and I don't want them to know that. In one case, someone was dating a soldier, and they were like, I don't want them to know I'm dating a soldier. In another case, someone called me and they were like, hey, take out that part. I don't want the PSNI knocking on my door because they don't know that I was present at that attack or blah, blah, blah. So people are scared. To this day, people are scared. People don't want to incriminate themselves or incriminate anybody else. And, it's messy. There was just some DNA evidence that came out last week that might lead to arrests for what's called the M62 coach bombing, this bomb that went off in the 70s that killed a bunch of soldiers in England. And they're saying a lot of people could get arrested for it now with new DNA evidence. And that's so murky territory because, with the Good Friday Agreement, does that absolve every one of these attacks, or only if you admit that you took part in these attacks? I don't know. So, Scapatici's will 2 weeks ago, like that was sealed, which only happens to the royal family. Because people sealed for 75 years because people don't, people could be targeted based on who the money is going to, or if people see how much money he was probably paid by the British state, people are going to be really pissed off. So, yeah, it's such a recent thing that people are still terrified, I think, of either incriminating or just bringing to the surface, or, yeah, it's a hard one. I've met a lot of people who are very tight-lipped.
Okay, so what's next for Oisin Feeney and the Troubles podcast?
Oh, I don't know. I must run out of episodes soon, but every time I finish a season, I get so many other like recommended episodes or recommended stuff. So I've just launched season 6. I'm 2 or 3 episodes in. I have absolutely no plan. So I'm going to try and get one out next week. I've got 7 interviews I'm sitting on, and I don't want to put them all out together. I want to mix them up with narrative stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I want to make more podcasts about different issues as well. I want to try and bring my stick, which isn't particularly unique. It's just deadpan telling of history, into somewhere else. I'd like to bring listeners somewhere else. So, yeah, I don't know. Or, get on as many people to talk. I'd love to have Bill Clinton on. I'd love to have Arlene Foster on, Jerry Adams, particularly Bernadette Devlin, Bernadette McAllister. She's my number one right now.
So that's our first guest of the new season, Oisin Feeney of the Troubles podcast. A big thank you to Oisin for taking time out of his hectic schedule to speak to me. Please see all links relating to Oisin and the Troubles podcast down below and check them out. You will not be disappointed. We'll be back in a fortnight with our next guest. Until then, please like and share where and when you can. Until the next time.